Episode 7 of 20, Connecting Authentic PBL to Students and Families. Sandra was a parent who understood project-based learning. Now, don't get me wrong, she did not at first. She was in a traditional school when she was a kid, but her son was in a project-based learning environment, and he was that C student who was a leader and pretty confident kid. You'd say, oh, he's a good kid, he's easy to get along with, he was funny, he did all those things, but he was pretty average in school. He wasn't trying to get to the top of anything, not even in sports. He was just kind of average. And what Sandra saw in her son was that project-based learning opened up a whole new world to him. It opened up a world of community partners. It opened up a world of opportunity that he hadn't seen before. Before, he was just kind of floating along because things were pretty easy for him. He probably could have gotten A's, but he chose not to. He probably could have been at the top end of his sports teams, but he chose not to. And now suddenly he was interacting with community partners, lawyers, doctors, CEOs of banks, and that lit him up. The fact that the work that we were doing actually applied to the world got him fired up, and he started doing more and actually kind of dipping into his potential. So she saw that, loved it. She saw what it did to his friends, right? That would come over. It's like, oh, you're producing real work. You used to be really lazy. Like, those are her words. And so she was an advocate for project-based learning as a parent. Now, that's a super big deal. When you get up to the podium and you give your talk about project-based learning and you talk about the research and why it's awesome and all these different things, that's great. But when a parent comes in and says that this completely changed my child in personality and content and academics, and his friends that are in this project-based learning strand as well, that speaks volumes for other parents, right? There's instant trust. There's no other agenda that Sandra has, right? So developing advocates at the family level, the parent level, is such a big deal. And every administrator can connect authentic PBL to students and families by answering these 3 questions. The first question that you need to answer for students and for families is, what do they need to understand about the PBL framework in order to feel excited about the changes? Everybody understands that things need to change. Nobody wants to be a part of that change, right? So we know that change is difficult, but we also know we have to change in order to get better. So how do we get people excited about that change? We show them the outcomes, right? So this is a question we have to be able to answer for our parents, because you're going to say, hey, let's do project-based learning. And say, well, what's that? That's a huge question, right? Don't just give the definition of PBL right there. That is not the right answer to that. That's a question that you're going to deflect just a little bit and say, great question. Let me tell you about PBL, some of the outcomes and some of the stories. And things that they're going to want to know is, project-based learning still going to allow my child to go to college? Yes. In fact, they'll be better prepared, right? Can they still do sports? Some of you might be at a charter school. You might be in a school within a school. That's something that parents are going to want to know. Can they still do band and choir? Those types of things. You need to answer those questions right off the bat, because you know they're coming. Or if you really want to take a great twist as you're doing a community partner meeting, and I'll give you some tips on that in a later episode coming down the pipe. But when you invite the community in to talk about project-based learning, you might have a need to know list, and you put those need to knows up there, and now you can start answering them. Oh, Sandra asked this. Oh, Judy asked this. And yes, you can still do sports. And yes, this is a college track. This is not an alternative program, because that will come up as well. So the other things you want to let them know is the same reasons that you want project-based learning in your school. A lot of those are going to align with the parents. You just might need a little quarter twist to make sure you're speaking the right language. So why PBL? Why now? Because that's what our employers are demanding. If you want your children to have jobs in the 21st century, as AI continues to grow, they need to have these skills. In fact, and this is where you bring in your research, here is the top 5 things that industry partners want, and you list them off. It's right. And you can look at any list you want, whether it's Entrepreneur Magazine, you can go into College Board, wherever you go, it's going to be some form of problem solving, collaboration, presentation, agency, and creativity. Like, those are always in the top 10, right? So it's what our employers want. And we want our kids to be employable, and parents want their child to be employable. They want their child to not be in their basement. All right. So what is it that parents want? And try to answer that question locally for you. What do your parents need to understand about the PBL framework and the outcomes in order to feel excited about the changes? You don't want them to just accept them. You don't want them to say, okay. You really want to be excited. You want to create, and you need to grab some testimonials from parents so that you're creating this momentum. And a testimonial can come from anywhere. It does not have to be a formal testimonial. When Sandra says, wow, my son seems more engaged in school right now. Thank you, Mr. Stoyer. You write that down and say, hey, Sandra, do you mind if I use that in my next newsletter? Can I use that as a testimonial? Sure, no problem. Right? So you're writing down those things that you're hearing as well as things that are being written to you. Those are all testimonials. You're trying to get these parents on board. You also want to let them know one more thing in this first question is that you've got to let them know that something has changed in the workplace. It's different when these parents were in the workforce, right? And even with some of our parents from the workforce, it has changed. So school needs to change too. That's why we are making this change so we can best serve your child. Because when parents come into that meeting, they want their community to be successful. They want all the kids to be successful, but primarily they want their child to be successful. They're really coming in with some selfish motives, and that's okay. It totally makes sense, but we need to speak to that. So the second question that you will bring to your students and your families is, how will you include their voices in the decisions as you move towards PBL? So just like in the classroom, we know that when we're involving our students in the classroom, they're becoming more engaged. We want to do the same thing with families. How are they going to be a part of the decision making? Now, are they going to pick your next curriculum? Are they going to decide the schedule? No, but how can we get them involved? If you haven't done profile of a graduate work, that's a great way to involve the community, to involve families, to get industry partners involved. So what do we want our children to know, say, and do when they leave our school? And I say school, not just your system, because it depends on where you're at as far as a principal. If you're at an elementary school, I think you take your profile of a graduate down to like when they leave your school, say it's fifth grade, when they leave fifth grade and they go to middle school, what do you want them to know, say, and do? When they go from middle school to high school, if you're a middle school principal, like that's your profile of a graduate, and you probably have one for your district too. I understand that, but you want to bring that down to the level that parents and kids can understand and teachers can understand, frankly, so that these are the skills we're going to build in these kids in elementary school so they're successful in middle school, and that's going to build right into high school, so when they leave our K-12 program, they're ready to rock. Whether it's the workforce that they go straight into or they go into college, they're going to be ready with the skills that they need to be successful. So profile of graduate work, really, if you're doing that well, and there are a lot of ways to do that. We help schools do that. Battelle does a great job. There's a lot of different ways to do profile of a graduate, but you're bringing in outside voices is the best way to do that. You're not just going to say, these are the 5 things that I think are important. The whole process is building momentum. And then you come up with 5 things. You say, well, Ryan, it took us 4 months to come up with 5 ideas that I already knew what they were. That's right. That's right. The 5 months is really getting other people on board so that you're not out there just waving a flag with 5 things, but everybody else is now behind this work. You're trying to get more people involved than just you. So as you're looking at that, you're going to talk to parents in profile of graduate. You can take them on a school visit, right? I love school visits to start building vision for your teachers and for you and your coaches. Bring a parent, bring a community partner. Some of our model schools, that's how they started, is they got a lot of momentum outside of just the school environment, right? School board members get a lot of support because it's a change process, right? And in a change process, it's not a small problem. This is a large problem. And when I say problem, I don't mean that it's an issue. I mean that we're trying to move a lot of different parts. It's not as simple as, should we change the bus route? Which is actually a pretty complicated example. It's not as easy as, should we change the route for drop off, right? There might be a different way that you should go. That's a problem that's pretty solvable. We're talking about change process. And at that point, you have a lot of people involved. At that point, you need to find bright spots. There's a whole process to this as well. But the thing I want to get to you in this episode is you need people, you need support. So find ways to bring them on board. One more in this section of how do you include parent voices here is they can come be an authentic audience. And in Sandra's case, she would come in and she was a stay-at-home mom. So you say, well, why is she sitting on panels for, this presentation about genetic diseases? Well, because she's an outside audience. She's suddenly not, somebody's mom that, you were out getting snacks after the soccer game. Suddenly you're presenting in a different way. So when Billy presents to Sandra, his buddy's mom, there's still that little level of anxiety, of tension, of stress. And that's what we want from an authentic audience. And it also lets Sandra see the amazing things that Billy is now saying. Like Billy usually says dumb things after soccer practice, but suddenly he's like presenting well and presenting himself well, and he dressed up. That's a big deal. And now Sandra has a story to tell at the next soccer game. Hey, what's that PBL thing going on at the school? And she's got this other story to tell. Stories are a big deal. Advocates are a big deal. So put parents on some of those authentic audiences. The third question that you're going to ask to get support from students and parents as you bring PBL to your school is, how will you message and market the shift? This question is for you. How are you going to message and market the shift to project-based learning? I'm going to give you an example of Rise Elementary in Neosho, Missouri. It's one of our model schools, model districts, and they did an awesome job. Just an awesome job leading up to. They took a year to bring about this elementary school that was going to be STEM focused, project-based learning as their instructional model. They actually had a brand new building that they were using. Technically, they tried a couple different buildings, but they landed in a really neat building downtown. So cool space, new learning environment. There's a lot of questions in the community, right? Why are we doing something different? What's going to happen? All these questions we're talking about, are my kids on college track? Who goes here? Who's going to teach here? Well, they had community meetings. They just said, hey, at 7 o'clock on Thursday, we're going to be answering questions about the new school that we're bringing. And they've got a slide deck that they run through, and they take questions and they get input, and they've got parents on the panel, and they've got teachers on the panel, and they've got kids on the panel that have been doing project-based learning, and now it's all going to be one school. And when they launched, they had more applicants than they had spots by a lot, right? So they had enough slots for kids, and then they had another 75 slots that kids went on the waiting list. And they're still rocking that right now as you listen to this. Isn't that cool? It's super cool. So if you market this well, it goes smoothly. Be transparent, get people involved. I'll give you another example of a school where it didn't go well. This was when it wasn't one of our schools, but knew it well. It was one when I was still in the classroom, and project-based learning got a bad name. And somebody on the school board decided that they didn't like it. So eventually it went away. There was a lot of kind of headbutting and a lot of things. A lot of parents loved it. Some parents decided they didn't like it. So here's where we came in, is we came back and we called it service learning. And we did all the same things, and everybody thought it was amazing. It wasn't the work that was happening in the classroom. It was that somebody got the wrong idea of what project-based learning was, got sideways, and started talking about that. We didn't have enough momentum for people to talk about the positive things. We changed the name, did all the same things, and people loved it. So it really is a marketing game. If you say, well, I'm not into marketing, everybody's in a marketing game, right? Marketing is just talking about the great things that are happening in your school. In this case, you're marketing your vision to people, and you want to get buy-in and momentum. So how will you message and market the shift? You need to get the message out. You need to think about the different stakeholders that are involved. So those are the three questions I want you to bring when you start talking about authentic PBL and you're bringing it to students and families. And if it sounds like a lot of extra work, it is. It is. But I think it's our duty, it's our job to bring this to families, because they don't understand. They're not reading the articles and the books that you're reading. They're thinking about their experience in school, which wasn't always positive. And even if it was positive, it was likely sit and get, and they were good at it, right? And if they're doing well, well, I want the same thing for my child. Well, maybe, except that things are different and they need to change. So we need to explain that, because it's something different. We owe that to them. So the three questions are, what do they need to understand about the PBL framework to get them excited about it? Remember, you want them excited, not just accepting. The second question is, how will you include their voices in decision-making so that you can move forward with PBL? And the third question is kind of a larger systemic question of, how will you message and market this PBL shift? And if you can answer those with you and your leadership team, it doesn't have to just be you, but as you're thinking about those, everybody's starting to build momentum and they're getting excited about your PBL launch and vision. So your call to action today is to connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. We'll have links in the show notes. And one reason you should connect is that, one, we'd love to magnify the work that you're doing. So if you connect us, we're happy to retweet those things or push it out however we can. But we also do boot camps. We do 6-day challenges, right? So we're putting resources out there to help you on your PBL journey. We want to support you in any way that we can. So you've got students and families ready. They're on board. You have momentum. Now, how do you get your staff fully ready? I'll see you in the next episode to help answer that question.